Read with me, episode 3 is live. Welcome. So, this is another new episode for another Sunday. ಸೊ ಈ ಒಂದು ಬುಕ್ಕಲ್ಲಿ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ವೀಕ್ ನೀವು ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಲೈವಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ರಿ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಇನ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ವೀಕ್ ಸೊ ಎಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ಓದಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂದರೆ compounding and confounding. So alivargu, so we have studied this book called psychology of money. So it's a 53 page vargu complete ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. So today we are starting with getting wealthy versus staying wealthy, chapter number 5. So persons who are following this Sunday live, read with me episode number 3. So welcome back, thank you for joining. And ಈ ಒಂದು ವಿಡಿಯೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಸೊ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಅಗೈನ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ವಿತ್ ದ ಸೈಕಾಲಜಿ ಆಫ್ ಮನಿ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ 5, ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ದಿ ವರ್ಸಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಯಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ದಿ. ಸೊ ನೀವು ಇನ್ನುವರೆಗೂ ನೋಡಿಲ್ಲ ಈ ಎಪಿಸೋಡ್ಸ್ನ ಅಂದರೆ ಸೊ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅನದರ್ ಆಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಟು ದಿಸ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ 2 ಎಪಿಸೋಡ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಥರ್ಡ್ ಎಪಿಸೋಡ್ ಆನ್ ದಿ ರೋ. ಸೊ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಗೋ ದೇರ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಎಂಜಾಯ್. ಈ ಒಂದು ಲೈವ್ನ ನೀವು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಎಂಜಾಯ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಪ್ಲಸ್ ರೀ ರೆಕಾರ್ಡೆಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇದು ನೀವು ನೋಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ಸೊ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ. ವಿ ಆರ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ವಿತ್ ದಿ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ನ್ಯೂ ಹ್ಯಾಬಿಟ್ ವಿಚ್ ಐ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಡ್. ಸೊ ಸಂಡೇ ಬಂದು ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಮಿನಿಮಮ್ 1 hour ಆಫ್ ಲೈವ್ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ಇದ್ರ ಹಿಂದೆ ಇರುವ ಮೋಟಿವೇಶನ್ ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ ಸೊ ಪ್ರಮೋಟ್ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ನಾನು ಈ ಒಂದು ಹ್ಯಾಬಿಟ್ಸ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಎಂಡ್ ಅಪ್ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್ ದಿಸ್ ಬುಕ್ ಇನ್ ಫ್ರಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಯು. ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ ಡಾಕ್ಯುಮೆಂಟ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಅಂತ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು. ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್ ವಿತ್ ದಿ 5th ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್, ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ದಿ ವರ್ಸಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಯಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ದಿ. ಗುಡ್ ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ನೆಸೆಸರಿ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಮೇಕಿಂಗ್ ಗುಡ್ ಡಿಸಿಷನ್. It's about consistently not screwing up. Okay, very nice and interesting. Let's get started with the page number 57. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಬುಕ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ನೀವು ತಗೊಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಆರ್ ಎಲ್ಸ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಲಿಸನ್ ಟು ದಿ ಆಡಿಯೋ ಬುಕ್, ಇಲ್ಲಾಂದ್ರೆ PDF ನ ಡೌನ್ಲೋಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್ ವಿತ್ ದಿ ಪೇಜ್ ನಂಬರ್ 57. There are million ways to get wealthy and plenty of books on how to do so, but there's only one way to stay healthy. Some combination of fragility and paranoia. So it's different. And that's the topic we don't discuss enough. And let's begin with the quick story about two investors, either of whom knew that other, but whose path crossed in an interesting way most a century ago. Jesse Livermore was the greatest stock market trader on his day, and born in 1877. He became a professional trader before most people knew you could do such a thing. By the age 30, he was worth the inflation adjusted equivalent of 100 million. Oh shit, 100 million ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ನಂಬರ್. ಓಕೆ, ಅಗೇನ್ by 1920, Jesse Livermore was already one of the most well known investor in the world, and the stock market crash that year that us heard in the Great Depression cemented his legacy in history. More than a third of the stock market value was wiped out in the October 1929 week, whose day were later named Black Monday, Black Tuesday, and Black Thursday. Livermore wife Dottie feared that worst when her husband returned home on the October 29th. Report of the Wall Street spectacular commenting suicide were spreading across New York, and she and her children graced Jessie at the door in the tears, while her mother was so distraught she hid in another room screaming. ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಲಿವರ್ಮೋರ್ದು. ಓಕೆ, ಜೆಸಿ ಅಕಾರ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಟು ದ biographer and Tom Rubthorn stood confused for the few moments before realizing what was happened. He then broke the news to his family in a stroke of the genius and the luck. He had been uh, short the market, and being betting stocks would decline. You mean we are not ruined? Dottie asked. No darling, I have just had my best ever trading day. We are fabulously rich and can do whatever we like, Jessie said. Dottie ran to her mother and told her to be quiet. And in one day, Jesse Livermore made a equivalent of more than 3 billion. During one of the worst months in the history of the stock market, he became one of the richest men in the world. As a Livermore family celebrated their unfathomable success, another man wandered the street of the New York is desperation. Abraham German Maskey was a multi-millionaire real estate developer who made a fortune during the roaring 1920s. As the economy boomed, he did what virtually ever other successful New Yorker New Yorker did in the late 1920s, bet heavily on the surging stock market. On October 26, 1929, the New York Times published an article that, in two paragraphs, portrayed the tragic ending. Bernard, 10 Central Attorney of 225 Broadway, was asked yesterday morning by Mr. Abraham Germansky of Mount Veron to help find her husband missing since Thursday morning. Germansky, who is 50 years old and East Side real estate operator, was said by the Sandler to have invested heavily in stock. Sandler said that he was told by Mr. Germansky that a friend saw her husband late. And Thursday was a Wall Street near the stock exchange. According to her, in front, her husband was tearing a strip of the ticker tape into bits of scattering in on the sidewalk as he walked towards the Broadway. And what, as far as we know, was the end of Abraham and Germansky. And here we have a contrast. The October 1929 crash made Jesse Livermore one of the richest men in the world. It ruined Abraham and Germansky perhaps and his life. But fast forward 4 years and the story cross paths again. After his 1929 blowout, Livermore, overflowing with the confidence, made a larger and larger bets, and he would up for over his head in increasing amounts of debt, and eventually lost everything in the stock market. Broke the ashamed, he disappeared for 2 days in 1933. His wife set out to find him. Jesse L. Livermore, the stock market operator of 1100 Park Avenue, missing and has lost not been seen since 3 p.m. yesterday. The New York Times wrote in 1933 he returned, but his path was set. Livermore eventually took his own life. The timing was different, but Germansky and Livermore shared the character trait, and they were both very good at getting wealthy and equally bad at staying wealthy. Okay, even if wealthy is not the word you would apply to yourself, the lessons from the observation apply to everyone at all incomes levels. Getting money is one thing, keeping it is another thing. Getting money is one thing and keeping it is the other thing. So very beautiful line. Okay, and if I had to summarize money success in the single world is to be would be survival. As we see in the chapter 6, 40% of company success enough to become a publicly traded lost effectively all of their value over time. The Forbes 400 list of the richest American has been an average roughly 20% turnover per decade for causes that don't have to with the death transferring money to another family member. Capitalism is hard, but part of the reason has happened is because getting money and keeping money are the two different things. Correct, Allah? So getting money and keeping money is the two different things. Finally, we completed one page, and getting money requires taking risk and being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But keeping money requires the opposite of taking risk, and it requires humility and fear that would you made can be taken away from you just as fast. It requires frugality and acceptance that at least some of what you have made in the attributable to luck. So past success can't be relied upon the repeat indefinitely. Michael Mortis, and billionaire head of Sequel Capital, and asked the Charlie Rose why Sequia was successful. Mortiza mentioned ಯಾರು ಇವರಲ್ಲ and longevity, nothing that some VC firms exist for 5 or 10 years, but Sequential has prospered for 4 decades. Rose asked why that was. Mortiza, I think we are always been afraid of going out of the business. Rose, really? So it's fear. Only the paranoid survive. And Mortiza, there is a lot of truth to that, and we assume that tomorrow would be likely yesterday. We can't afford to rest on the our laurel, and we can't be complacent with mm, with can't assume that yesterday and success translate into tomorrow good fortune. Here again, survival, not growth or brains or insights. The ability to stick around for a long time without wiping out of the being forced to give up is that what makes the biggest difference. This should be cornerstone of your strategy, whether it is investing or your career or your business your own. There are two reasons why survival mentality is so key with the money. ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಬೇಕು. ಸೊ ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ, ಸೊ ಎಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಡೇ ಸರ್ವೈವಲ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಥಿಂಗ್. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಕಾಸೇ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಏನಕ್ಕೂ ಕಾಸಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ, ಸೊ ವೈ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಯು ಶುಡ್ ಥಿಂಕ್ ದಿಸ್. ಹೆನ್ಸ್ ಅಗೇನ್, ಓಕೆ, ನಾಟ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಆರ್ ಬ್ರೈನ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಇನ್ಸೈಟ್ಸ್. ನಾನು ಆ ಪ್ಯಾರಾಗ್ರಾಫ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸತಿ ಓದ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ದ ಅಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಟು ಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಅರೌಂಡ್ ಫಾರ್ ಅ ಲಾಂಗ್ ಟೈಮ್ ವಿತೌಟ್ ವೈಪಿಂಗ್ ಔಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ ಫೋರ್ಸ್ಡ್ ಟು ಗಿವ್ ಅಪ್ is what makes the biggest difference. This should be the cornerstone of your strategy. Okay, whether it is an investing or in your career or in your business, your own, you own. And there are two reasons why survival mentality is so key with the money. One is the obvious: few gains are so great that they are worth wiping yourself ever out over. The other was other, as we saw in the chapter 4, it is a counterintuitive math of compounding. Compounding only works if you can give an asset years and years to grow. It's like a planting oak trees. The year of growth will never show progress. 10 years can be meaningful difference, and 50 years can create something absolutely extraordinary. But getting and keeping the extraordinary growth requires surviving all the unpredictable ups and downs that everyone inevitably experience over time. And we can spend years trying to figure out how Buffett achieved his investment returns, how he found the best companies, the cheapest stocks, the best managers, the hard less hard but equally important in pointing out what he didn't do. He didn't get carried away with the depth ಅಂದ್ರೆ, he didn't carried away with the depth. He did not panic and sell during the 14 recession he lived through. Okay, and he didn't slushy his business reputation. He did not attach himself to one strategy, one worldview, or one passing trend. He didn't rely on other money managing investing investments, and through the public company meant investors could withdraw their capital. He didn't burn himself out and quit or retire. He survived. Survival gave him longevity, and longevity investing consistently from the age of 10 to the at least age of 89. Oh my god, is what made compounding work wonder. And the single point is that what matters most when describing his success. To show you what I mean, you have to hear the story of the Rick Gurney. You likely heard about investing duo and Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. About 40 years ago, they were the third member of the group Rick Gurney. ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಸರು Gurin. And Warren, Charlie, and Rick made the investment together, interviewed business managers together, and Rick kind of disappeared, at least relative Buffett and Munger success. Investor Mosh Parby once asked the Buffett that what happened to the Rick. Monish recalled. Warren said, Charlie and I always knew that we would become incredibly wealthy. We were not the hungry to get wealthy. We knew we could hit would happen. Rick was just as smart as, but he was in hurry. What happened was that in 1973 and 1974 downturn, the Rick was levered with the margin loans, and the stock market went down 70%, almost 70% in those 2 years. So he got margin calls. He sold his Berkshire stock to Warren, and Warren actually said, I bought Rick big Berkshire stock. at under $40 a piece, and Rick was forced to sell because he was livid. And Charlie, Warren and the Rick were equally skilled at the getting wealthy, but Warren and the Charlie had the added skill of staying wealthy, which over time is the skill that matters most. Nazib Talib put it this way, and having an edge and surviving are the two different things. The first requires two second, and you need to avoid ruin at all cost. Applying the survival mindset to the real world comes to down to appreciating three things more than I wanted. More than I want big returns. I want to be financially unbreakable, and I'm unbreakable. I'm unbreakable. I actually think I'll get the biggest returns because I'll be able to stick around long enough for compounding to work wonders. No one wants to hold the cash during a bull market. They want they want to own asset that goes up a lot, and you look and feel conservative holding and cash during the bull market, and because you become actually aware of how much return you are giving up by not owning the good stuff. And say cash earn 1% and stock return 10% of a year, that 9% gap with and you were the day gain at your day. But if the cash prevents you from having to sell your stock during the bear market, and actually return you earned on the cash is not 1% a year, it would be many multiple of that. What's preventing on the desperate ill-timed stock scale can do more for your lifetime returns then picking dozens of big time winners. Compounding does not rely on the earning big returns, merely good returns sustained uninterrupted for the longest period of the time, especially in the time of chaos and havoc, and will always win. Second, planning is important, but most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan not going according to the plan. Eh? Planning is important, but most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan not going according to the plan. Wow, what line ala planning is important. Okay, planning is important, but most important part of every plan is plan on the plan not going according to the plan. Planning is important. ನನಗೆ ಈ ಲೈನ್ ತುಂಬಾ ಇಷ್ಟ ಆಗಿದೆ. Planning is important, but most important part of every plan is on the plan. um, Planning is important, but most important part of every plan is to plan the plan not going according to the plan. So this is amazing line. And what's the saying? You plan god law financially and investment planning are critical because they let you know whether your current actions are within the reclaim of reasonable. But few plans of any kind survive their first encounter with the real world. If you are projecting your income and saving rate and makes return over the next 20 years, think about all the big stuff that's happened in the last 20 years that no one could have foreseen: the September 11th and the housing boom and the bust that caused nearly to 10 million Americans to lose their homes, financially crisis, and the class caused almost 9 million to lose their jobs, and according to break stock market really that ensured, and the coronavirus that shakes the world. As I write this, a plan is only useful if it can survive reality, and your future filled with the unknown is everyone's reality. A good plan doesn't pretend this weren't true, and it emphasizes room for error. The more you need the specific elements of the plan and the truth, the more fragile your financial life becomes. If there is enough room for error in your saving rate, and that you can say, and it will be great if your market returns 8% of year over the next 30 years. But if it only but if it is only, how's the audio quality, Arnold's life? I want to know about the audio quality. Thanks for joining. And the more valuable your plan becomes, many beats. Many bets fails not because we're wrong, but mostly they were costly, mostly right in the situations that who's there, okay, that requires to be exactly right. Room for error, often called as margin of safety, is one of the most unpredictable force in finance, and it comes in the many forms: a fragile budget, flexing and thinking, and loose timeline, and anything that lets you feel happy, and with the range of outcomes. And a difference from the more conservative is avoiding a certain level of risk, margin of risk, by increasing your changes of survival. And its magic, it is the higher your margin of safety, the smaller your edge needs to be have a favorable outcome. Okay, okay. So far, so now ಇಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ 64 ಪೇಜ್ ವರೆಗೂ we are read this chapter called psychology of money, fifth chapter, getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Almost ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ they are discussing all about two persons ಹಿಂಗೆ ಕಾಸು earn ಮಾಡೋದು ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯ, so keeping that money is another thing. ಸೊ ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಲೆಸನ್. ಸೊ ಎಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಡೇ, ಸೊ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ಅರ್ನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರ್ತೀವಿ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಜನ, ಬಟ್ ಆ ಕಾಸನ್ನ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳೋದು ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಲ್ಲ. ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಜನ 1,80,000, 50,000 ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ 10 lakhs ಈ ಥರ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ಸ್ನ ಕೊಡೋ ಅವ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ಹೌ ಟು ಕೀಪ್ ದಟ್ ಮನಿ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಡೂ ಸಮಥಿಂಗ್, ಇವೆನ್ಚುಯಲಿ ಬರ್ನ್ ಔಟ್ ಆಗ್ದಿರಾ, ಸೊ ಸ್ಟೇಯಿಂಗ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಗೇಮ್. ಸೊ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಬಿಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಲಿಟಲ್ ಬಿಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಬೋರಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ಅನಿಸ್ತಿದ್ರು, ಬಟ್ ದ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್ ವೇ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಅದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಕೇಮ್ ಟು ದ ಎಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ ಫಿಫ್ತ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ದಿ ಅನದರ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್. ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ವಿತ್ ದಿಸ್, ಓಕೆ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತಿಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಕನ್ನಡ ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬರ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಈ ಒಂದು ಸೀರೀಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರುವ ಒಂದೇ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ, ಸೊ ಟು ಪ್ರಮೋಟ್ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್, ಓಕೆ. ಸೊ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಜನ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಮರ್ತೋಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಬುಕ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಓದೋದು ಮರ್ತೋಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ ವೀಕಲ್ಲಿ ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ 1 hour ನೀವು ಓದ್ರೂ ಒಂದು ಬುಕ್ನ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಎಷ್ಟು ಎಪಿಸೋಡಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಬುಕ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಮೈ ಥರ್ಡ್ ಎಪಿಸೋಡ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಟಾರ್ಗೆಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಮಿನಿಮಮ್ 1 hour. ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಇವಾಗ 21 minute ಆಗಿಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ 40 minutes ಇದೆ, ಅದ್ರ ಮೇಲೇನೂ ನಾವು ಓದ್ತೀವಿ. ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಲೈವ್ ಸೆಷನಲ್ಲಿ, ಸೊ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ರೆಡ್ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ 1 hour 25 minutes. ಸ್ಟೇ ವಿತ್ ಮೀ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ. ಈಗ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಸ್ಟೋರಿ. ಎ ಬಾರ್ಬಲ್ಡ್ ಪರ್ಸನಾಲಿಟಿ, ಆಪ್ಟಿಮಿಸ್ಟ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಫ್ಯೂಚರ್ ಬಟ್ ಪ್ಯಾರನಾಯ್ಡ್ ಅಬೌಟ್, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ಸ್. ನಾನು ಈಗ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಲ್ಲ, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ಸ್. ಥರ್ಡ್ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಎ ಬಾರ್ಬಲ್ಡ್ ಪರ್ಸನಾಲಿಟಿ, optimist about the future but paranoid about what will prevent you from getting to the future is vital. Optimist is usually defined as a belief that things will go well, and but that's incomplete. Sensible optimist is believe that odds are in your favor, and over time things will balance out to a good outcome, even if what happens in between is filled with the misery. And you fact, you know it will be filled with misery. You can be optimistic that the long term growth trajectory is up and to the right, and but equally sure that the road between now and then is filled with the landmines, and always will be. And those things are not mutually exclusive. The idea that something can gain over the long run while being the basket case in the short run is not intuitive, but that's how a lot of things work in life. By age 20, average person can lose roughly half of his sympathetic connections that had in their brain at the age 2, as sufficient and the redundant neuro pathways are cleared out. But the average 20-year-old is much smarter than the average 2-year-old. Destruction in the face of progression is not only possible but effective way of getting rid of excess. Imagine if you were a parent and could see inside your child brain. Ever morning you noticed a few sympathetic connections in your kid head. You would panic, you would say this can't be there. Right, there's loss and distractions here. We need an intervention, we need to see a doctor, but you couldn't. What you witnessing is the normal path of progress. And economies, markets, and career often follow its similar path: growth, aimed loss. And here is how US economy performed over the past 170 years. And ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ತೋರಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸಿ, this is how the growth will be there ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಓಕೆ. And but you know what happened during this period, and where we begin 1.3 million Americans died while fighting 9 major wars. Okay. Roughly 99.9% of all companies that had created went out of business. Four US presidents were assassinated. 675,000 Americans died a single year from the flu pandemic. 30 separate natural disasters killed at least 400 Americans each. 33 recessions lasted a cumulative 48 years. The number of forecasters who predicted any of those recessions around 20. The stock market fell more than 10% from the recent high, and at least one or two times. Most lost stocks lots of third of their value. At least 12 times annual inflation exceeded 7% in 20 separate years. The words economic pessimism appeared in the newsletter at least 29,000 times, according to the Google. Our standard of living increased 20-fold in this 170 years, but barely a day went by the lacked tangible reasons of pessimism. A mindset that can be paranoid and optimist at the same time is hard to maintain, because seeing things as a black and white, taking less effort there than accepting nauseous. But you need a short-term paranoia to keep you alive long enough to exploit long-term optimism. And Jesse Livermore figured out that the hard way. He associated Jeffy Livermore ಯಾರು ಗೊತ್ತಾ? ಸೊ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಒಬ್ರು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಗ್ರೇಟ್ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೆದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಈಸ್ ಲಿವರ್ಮೋರ್ Jesse. Jesse Livermore figured out the hard way. He associated good times with the end of the bad times, and getting wealthy made him feel like staying wealthy and inevitable, and that he was invincible after losing nearly everything he reflected. I sometimes think that no price is too high for the spectacular to pay to learn, that which will keep him from getting the swelled head. And a great many smashed by the brilliant men can be traced directly to the swelled head. And it's an expensive disease, he said everything to everybody. Next will look to another way. Growth in the face of adversity can be so hard to wrap your head around. Tails, you win. You can be wrong half the time and still you can make a fortune. So, oh my god, it's too hot here. Okay, so finally we have completed the chapter called fifth chapter. So fifth chapter ali major takeaway: getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Major takeaway from my end ಏನು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, so reflection time. So major takeaway, it's all about ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಕಾಸಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ಕಾಸನ್ನ ನೀವು ಬರ್ನ್ಔಟ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ಗೆ ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು. ಸೊ ಅದು ಒನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಥಿಂಗ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಎಷ್ಟೇ ಗೆಟ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ದಿ ಇಸ್ ಒನ್ ಥಿಂಗ್, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಕೀಪಿಂಗ್ ದಟ್ ಮನಿ ಇಸ್ ಒನ್ ಥಿಂಗ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅದು ಒಂದು. ಮತ್ತು ಎಷ್ಟೇ ಕಾಸಿದ್ರೂ ಲೈಕ್ ಬ್ರೋಕ್ ರೇಂಜ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು. ಸೊ ಕನ್ಸಿಸ್ಟೆಂಟಾಗಿ, ಸೊ ನೀವು ಆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ಗೆ, ಸೊ ನನ್ನ ಹತ್ರ ಏನೂ ಇಲ್ಲ ಹಂಗೆ ಆ ಥರ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು. ಸೊ ಅದನ್ನು ಗೆಟ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ದಿ ವರ್ಸಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಯಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ದಿ. ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಜನ ಇಂಪಲ್ಸಿವ್ ಬೈಯಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಆ ವಿಷಯ ಬೇಕಾಗೇ ಇರಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ಸ್ಟಿಲ್ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯನ ತಗೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ಟ್ರೈ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಅದನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಇನ್ ದಟ್ ವೇ, ಸೊ ಫಿಫ್ತ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಇಸ್ ಆಲ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಆ ಒಂದು ಬರ್ನ್ಔಟ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಬಾರ್ದು, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಕೀಪಿಂಗ್ ದ ಮನಿ ವಿತ್ ಯು. ಸೊ ಆ ಥರ ಒಂದು ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್. ಸೊ ಫಿಫ್ತ್ ಒನ್, ಟೇಲ್ಸ್, you win. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. So this is all about ಸಿಕ್ಸ್ತ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಟೋಟಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಇದೆ? 17 ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅಲ್ಲ, 20 ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ಸ್. ಓಕೆ, 20 ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಅಟ್ ಸಿಕ್ಸ್ತ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ವೆರಿ ಶಾರ್ಟ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅನ್ಕೊಂತೀನಿ. ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಲೆಟ್ ಮೀ ಚೆಕ್. No, it is also a pretty good 6 to 8 pages chapter. Let's go. Okay. I have been banging away at this thing for 30 years. And I think the simple math is some project works and some does don't. And there's no reason to behave balbor either one, and just get on the next bad pit accepting the Screen Actors Guide Award. I have been banging away in this thing for 30 years. I think the simple math is some projects work and some don't. And there is no reason to behavior either one, just get on to the next. Bad Pitt accepting a Screen's Actors Guide Award, and hence burning and filled Nazi Germany in 1936, and he settled in America where he studied literature at UC Berkeley. By most accounts, he did not show particular promise in his youth, but by the 1990s, Bergin was, by any measure, one of the most successful art dealers of all time. In 2000, Bergin sold part of this massive collection of the Picasso's, Barcues, Keeley, and Masti and German government for more than 100 million euros. It was such a bargain that the most more power, more than 100 million euros. 100 million euros. It was such a bargain that the German effectively considered it a donation. The private market value of collection was well over a dollar billion. That one person can collect huge quantities of masterpieces is astounding. Art is subjective as it gets. How could anyone have foreseen early in life whatever to become the most sought after works of the century? You can say skill, you can say luck, and the investment from Horizon Research had a third explanation, and it is very relevant to investors. The great investors bought vast quantities of art, and the film writers a subset of the collections of turned ಈ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡೋಣ. ಸೊ ಆ ಕಡೆನೆ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಓದಿ ಓದಿ ಬೋರ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಓದೋಣ. So vicious subset collections turned out to be a great investments, and they were well and sufficient long period of time allowed to the portfolio return to converge upon the return to the best elements in the portfolio. That's all that happens. The great art dealers operated like an index fund, and they bought everything they could, and they bought it in portfolios, not individual pieces they happened to like, and then they sat and waited for few winners to emerge. And that's all that happens. Perhaps 99% of the work someone's like Bergin acquired in his life turned out to be turned out to be a little valuable, but does not particularly matters in the other 1% turn out to be to the work of someone else. Picasso's Bergin could be wrong most of the time and still end up stupidly written. Or a lot of things in business and investing work this way. Long tails, the farthest ends of the distribution of outcomes, have tremendous influence in finance. With a small number of events can account for the majority of outcomes. That can be hard to deal with even if you understand the math. It is not intuitive that an investor can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. It means we underestimate how normal it is for a lot of others to fail, and which causes us to overreact, and when they do. And Steamboat, while put a Walt Disney on the map as an animator, business success was another story. Disney first studio went bankrupt, and his films were monstrously expensive to produce and financed, at outrageous term by the mid 1930s, and Sydney had poured more than 400 cartoons. Most of them were sought, most of them were beloved by viewers, and most of them for lost a fortune. Snow White and the 70 Doves changed everything. The 8 million it earned in the first 6 months of 1938 was order of magnitude higher than anything the company earned previously. It transformed Disney Studios. All company debts were paid off, and the key employees not a retention bonus, and the company purchased the new state of art studio in the Burbank. There it remains today. A Oscar returned Walt from the famous full-blown celebrity by 1938, and he had produced several hundred hours of film. But in business terms, the 83 minutes of Snow White were all that matters. Anything that is huge, profitable, and famous or influential is the result of the tail event. Outlaid one in the thousands of millions event, and most of our attention goes to the things they are huge, profitable, famous, or influential, when most of that what we pay attention to it results of the tail, and it's easy to underestimate how rare and powerful they are. Some tail driven industries are obvious, and a tail taken venture, if VC makes 50 investments, they likely accept half of them to the fail and to do pretty well, and one or two to be bonanza that drive 100% of fund returns. Investment from correlation ventures one crunched two number out of more than 21 ventures financing from 2004 to 14. 65 65% lost money. 2.5% of investment made 10x and 20x. 1% made more than 20x return. Half percent about 100 companies and of 21,000 earned 50x or more, and that's where the majority of industries returns comes from. And this, you might think, is what makes a venture capital a risky. Venture capital so risky, and everyone investing in VC venture capital known as a risky. Most startups fail, and world is only kind enough to allow few mega successor. If you want to safer, predictable, and more sustainable returns, you invest a large public company, or so might you think. Remember, the tails drive everything. The distribution of success among large public stocks are over time, and it's not much different than it is in the venture capital. And most public companions are dudes, and few do well and handle full some extraordinary wins that account for the majority of the stock market returns. And JP Morgan Asset Management once published that the distribution of return of the Russell 300 index, a big borrowed collections of public companies since 1980s. 40% of all Russell 3000 stocks component lost at least 70% of their value and never recovered over this period. Effectively, all of the index overall returns came from 7% of compound companies, and that outperformed by the at least two standard deviations. That's the kind of the thing you will accept from the venture capital. And but it has happened inside the boring diversified index, and this dumping of most public companies spares no industry. More than half of the public technology and the telecom companies lose most of their value and never recover, even among some utility, and the failure rate is most more than in 1 in 10 percentage of companies experiencing catastrophic loss. ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಕಮೆಂಟ್ ಬಿಲೋ. ಸೊ ನಿಮ್ಗೇನು ಅನಿಸ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ. ನನಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ಓದ್ತಾ ಇರೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಬಿಟ್ ಬೋರಿಂಗ್ ಅನಿಸ್ತಿದೆ ಈ ಚಾಪ್ಟರು. ಟೈಲ್ಸ್ ಯು ವಿನ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ನ ಓದ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಸೊ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದಿ ಸೈಕಾಲಜಿ ಆಫ್ ಮನಿ. ಸೊ ಈ ಒಂದು ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಈ ಒಂದು ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಚಾಪ್ಟರಲ್ಲಿ ನನಗೂ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಬೈ ದ ಎಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್, ಸೊ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಲೆಟ್ ಯು ನೋ. ಓಕೆ, ಪರ್ಸೆಂಟೇಜ್ ಆಫ್ ಕಂಪನಿ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸಿಂಗ್ The interesting things here in that you have to have achieved the certain level of success to become public company and member of the Russell 3000. These are established corporations to not fly by the night startups. Eventually, still most have the lifespan measured in the years, not a generation. Take an example of one of the companies, Carcolo, former member of Russell 300. Russell 300 index ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸೊ ನಿಫ್ಟಿ 50 ಅಂತ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಕರಿತೀವಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಆ ಥರ ಅದು ಯು ಎಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಇಟ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಸಮ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಬಿಗ್ಗೆಸ್ಟ್ ಫಿಲಿಮ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ 1980s and 1990s, including the first three Rambo films and Terminator 2, Basic Instinct and Total Recall. Carcolo went public in 1987. It was a huge success, churning out it did $500 million in revenue in 1991, commanding a market cap of dollar 400 million. Big money bank. Hello, welcome to the live, and someone joined with us. Calcutta comment section is there, so please comment below. So thanks for joining. And that it failed, so I'm reading the book called Tail You Win. Okay, and the blockbuster stopped to the few big budgets, and project flopped, and by the mid 1990s, and car Carcolo was a history. It went bankrupt in 1996. Stock goes to zero. Have a nice day. A catastrophic loss, and one of the four in the public company's experiences. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಏನು ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅಂತಾನೆ ನನಗೆ ಅಷ್ಟು ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಟು ರೀಡ್. ದ ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಬಸ್ಟರ್ ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ಸ್ ಟು ಅ ಬಿಗ್ ಬಜೆಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಫ್ಲಾಪ್ಡ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದ ಮಿಡ್ 1990s. ಕಾರ್ಕೋಲೋ ವಾಸ್ ಅ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ. ಇಟ್ ವೆಂಟ್ ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಕರಪ್ಟ್ ಇನ್ 1996, ನಮ್ಮ ಬರ್ತ್ ಡೇಟ್, ಓಕೆ, ಬರ್ತ್ ಇಯರ್. ಸ್ಟಾಕ್ ಗೋಸ್ ಝೀರೋ. ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ನೈಸ್ ಡೇ. ಎ ಕ್ಯಾಟಾಸ್ಪೋರಿಕ್ ಲಾಸ್, and one that 4 in 10 public companies experience over time. Carcolo story and not worthy telling because it's unique, but because it's common. Here is the most important part of this story. The Russell 3000 has increased more than 73 fold since 1980. That is a spectacular return. That success. Fortune percentage of a company in the index were effectively failure, but 7% of components that performed extremely well were more than enough to offset that dudes, just like a Zins bargain. But with Microsoft and Walmart, most famous companies, instead of Picasso and Matisse. Not only do a few companies account for the most of the marketers return with, but within those companies are even more tail events. In 2018, Amazon drove 6% of the uh, S&P 500's return, and Amazon growth is almost entirely due to Prime and Amazon Web Services, with which itself are the tail events in the company that has experimented with hundreds of products and fire phones to travel agencies. Apple was responsible for almost 7% of index returns in the 2018, and it is driven overwhelmingly by its iPhone, which is the world of tech products in the tails y and tails get. And who's working at these companies. Google hiring accept rate is 0.2%. Facebook is 0.1%, and Apple is about 2%. So Apple working for the tail projects that drive tail, and returns have tail carriers. The idea that few things accounts for the most results in just a true of the companies in your investment portfolio. It's also an important part of your own behavior as an investor. Napoleon definition of the military genius was the man who can do the average things when all those around him are going crazy. It seem in investing, most financial advice is is about today. What should you do right now, and what stocks looks like good buys today. But most of the time today is not the important. Over the course of your life as an investor, the decisions that you make today or tomorrow or next week will not matter nearly as much as what you do during the small number of days, likely 1% of the time to less, and when everyone else around you is going crazy. And consider that would happen if you saved $1 every month from 19,900 to 2009. You could invest that 1% into US stock market every month, and rain or shine, and it doesn't matter if economists are screaming about the looming recession or a new bear market. You just keep investing. Let's call an investor who does its show. But many investing during a recession is too scary, so perhaps you invest your 1% in the stock market when the economy is not in your recession. Sell everything when it's a recession and save your monthly dollar in cash, and invest everything back into the stock and market with the recession ends. Well, call this investor Jim, or perhaps it takes a few months for a recession and to scare ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ stock market ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತದೆ, scare you out, and then it takes a while to regain confidence before you get back into the market. You invest 1% in stock and where no recession, sell 6 months after a recession begins and invest back in 6 months for the recession end. Well, you call out Tom, and how much money would these three investors end up with over time? Shu ends with $4,35,551, and Jim has $2,57,386, and Tom has $2,34,476. Shu wins by a mile. There were $1,428 months between 1900 and 2019. Just over 300 of them were during a recession. So, by keeping her cool during just the 22% of the time the economy was is in or near recession, Sue ends up with the almost three quarters more money than Jim or Tom. To give a more recent example, how you behaved as an investor during a few months in late 2008 and early 2009, while likely to have more impact on your life returns than everything you did from 2000 to 2008. Here is the old pilot cube, and that their jobs are hours and hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. And it's the same in investing. Your success as an investor will be determined by how you respond to punctuated moments of terror, not the years spent on the cruise control. A good definition of investing genius is man or woman who can do the average thing when all those around them are going crazy. Tails drive everything. When you accept that the tails drive everything is the business, investing and finance, and the realize that it's normal for lots of things to go wrong, break, fail and fall. And if you are good stock picker, and you will be right maybe half the time. If you are good business leader, maybe half of your products and strategy ideas will work. If you are good investor, most years will be just okay and plenty will be bad. If you are a good worker, you will be find to right company in the right field after several attempts and trials, and that's if you are good. And Peter Lynch is one of the best investors of all time. And if you are terrific in the business, you are right 6 times of out of 10. He once said that the fields where must be perfect every time. Flying a plane, for example, then there are a fields when you want to be at least pretty good nearly all the time. A restaurant chief, let's say, investing, business and finance are just not like these fields. Sometimes I have learned from both investors and entrepreneurs is that no one makes good decision at all time. The most impressive people are packed full of harmonious ideas that are often acted upon. Take Amazon. It's not an intuitive to think
a failed product launch at the major company would be normal and fine intuitive. You think the CEO should apologize to the shareholder, but CEO Jeff Bezos said shortly after the disastrous launch of the company fire phone, if you think that the big failure, we are working on much bigger failures right now. I'm not kidding. Some of them are going to make the fire phone look like tiny tip blip. It's okay Amazon to lose a lot of money or fire phone because fire stick ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಬಂದಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, so that's what they are discussing, because it will be offset by something like Amazon Web Services that earns tens of billions of dollars. And Tails to rescue. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings once announced his company was canceling several big budget productions. He responded, "Our hit ratio is way too high right now. I'm always pushing the content team. We have to take more risk and you have to try more crazy things. And because we should have a higher cancel rate overall." This is not a delusion of the failure or of responsibility. They are a smart acknowledgement of how Tails drives success. For every Amazon Prime or Orange is the blue black known with a certain, and you will be have some dudes. Part of why this isn't intuitive is because in most fields we only see the finished products, not the losers in incurred that led to the tail success products. This Chris Rock I see on the TV is hilarious, flawless, and this Chris had performs in dozens of small clubs each year is just okay. That is by design, not comedic, and genius is smart enough to preventive known what jokes will land well. Even big comedian test their material in small clubs before using it big venues. Rock was asked once if he missed small clubs. He responded, when I start a tour, it's not like I start out in arenas. Before this last tour, I performed in the place in the New Brunswick called that stress factor. I did about 40 to 50 shows getting ready for the tour. One newspaper prolified this same club's season, and it described Rock tumbling through the pages of notes and fumbling with the material. I'm going to have a cut some of these jokes, and he says mid skit the jokes I see a Netflix or the tales and the stuck out of the universe of hundreds of attempts. A similar thing happened in investing. It is to find Warren Buffett in more net worth for an average annual returns, or even his best notable investments. They are right things in open, and they are new what people talk about. It's much harder to piece together, and every investment is made over his 100 over his career. No one talks about dude picks and ugly made his career. No one talks about dude picks and ugly business and poor accusation. But there are a big part of Buffett's story, and there are other side of the tail driven returns. At the Berkshire Hathaway and shareholder meeting in 2013, Warren Buffett said he owned 400 to 500 stocks during the life of made most of his money on 10 of them. Charlie Munger followed up, if you remove just a few Berkshire top investment, its long-term track record is pretty average. When we pay special attention to the role models' success, we overlooked that their gain can come from small percent of their actions and makes our own failure, losses and setbacks feels like we are doing something wrong. But it's possible we are wrong or just short of right, and just as often and masters are, they may have been more right when they right, but they couldn't have been wrong with on the often of you. It's not whether you are right or wrong. That important gorgeous heroes once said, but how much money you make when you are right and how much you lose when you are wrong. You can be wrong half of the time and still make a fortune. There are 100 billion planets in our galaxies, and only once, as far as we know, with an intelligent life. The fact that you are reading this book is the result of the longest tale you can imagine. That's something to be happy about. Next, let's look how money can make you even happier. Finally, we are at 80th page of this book called Psychology of Money. Tales You Win ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್. ಟೇಲ್ಸ್ ಯು ವಿನ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್. ಸೊ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ರಿಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಆಗಿರುವ ವಿಷಯನ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಡ್ಯಾಮ್, ದಿಸ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಇಸ್ ಲಿಟಲ್ ಬಿಟ್ ಬೋರಿಂಗ್ ಸ್ಟಫ್ ಅಂತಾನೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಟೇಲ್ಸ್ ಯು ವಿನ್, ಬಟ್ ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ ಸಮ್ ಒಂದು ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ವಿಷಯಗಳು ನಾನು ಈ ಒಂದು ಚಾಪ್ಟರಲ್ಲಿ ಕಲ್ತ್ಕೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ಸಿಕ್ತು. ಟೇಲ್ಸ್ ಯು ವಿನ್. Sixth chapter is done, so we are moving towards the seventh chapter. But almost 54 minutes ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಐ ವುಡ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಟು ಎಂಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ಲೈವ್ ಹಿಯರ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಈ ಒಂದು ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಫ್ರೀಡಮ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ತುಂಬ ಚಿಕ್ಕದಾಗಿದೆ. ಮ್ಯಾನ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಕಾರ್ ಪ್ಯಾರಾಡಾಕ್ಸ್, ಅದು ಒನ್ ಪೇಜ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್. ಮ್ಯಾನ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಕಾರ್ ಪ್ಯಾರಾಡಾಕ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ಐ ಗೆಟ್ ಅನದರ್ 25 minutes ನಾನು ಇದನ್ನು ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಬಟ್ ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ ಸಮ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ in the next live, to be sure. So almost freedom, just a second. So in the next live ಅಲ್ಲಿ freedom, man car paradox, wealth is what you don't see, ಆಮೇಲೆ save money, ಈ ಥರ 4 ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ಸ್ನ ನಾನು ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಕವರಿಂಗ್ ಇನ್ ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಲೈವ್ ಸೆಷನ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಆನ್ ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸಂಡೇ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಬಿ ಗ್ರೇಟ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸಂಡೇ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಟ್ರೈ ಟು ಹಿಟ್ 2 hours ಮಾರ್ಕ್. 2 hours ಆಫ್ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನಾನು ಚಾಲೆಂಜಾಗಿ ತೊಗೊಳೋಣ ಅಂತಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ವೀಕಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ ಸಿ ಹೌ ದಿಸ್ ಗೋಸ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಈ ಒಂದು ಲೈವ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ನೀವು ರೆಕಾರ್ಡಿಂಗಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅಂದರೆ, ಸೊ ಐ ವುಡ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಟು ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸೋ ಮಚ್ ಫಾರ್ ಸ್ಪೆಂಡಿಂಗ್ ದ ಟೈಮ್ ಹಿಯರ್. ಸೊ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು 2 ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಇವತ್ತು. ಟೇಲ್ಸ್ ಯು ವಿನ್ ವರ್ಸಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಯಿಂಗ್ ಹೆಲ್ದಿ, ವೆಲ್ದಿ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಮೇಕಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ತ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಸ್ಟೇಯಿಂಗ್ ವೆಲ್ದಿ. ಸೊ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ವಾಚಿಂಗ್ ಸೋ ಫಾರ್. ನಾನು ಈ ಒಂದು ಲೈವ್ನ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಎಂಡ್ ರೈಟ್ ನೌ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾವಿಂಗ್ ಸಮ್ ಅದರ್ ಕಮಿಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ 56 minutes we have completed. So we have new viewers. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಕಮಿಂಗ್. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಈ ಒಂದು ಲೈವ್ ನಾನು ರೆಕಾರ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನಾನು ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಔಟ್ ದೇರ್. ಸೊ ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಅಗೇನ್ ವಿತ್ ಅನದರ್ ನ್ಯೂ ಸ್ಟ್ರೀಮ್. ನಾನು ಸ್ಟ್ರೀಮ್ನ ಹೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಮೀಟ್ ಯು ಅಟ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸಂಡೇ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ 12 o'clock. ಬಾಯ್.